Ahoy everyone. Today I am going to be working on my truck's turn signal. Recently it has been causing me some issues when I'm going right. It'll click into place when I go left, but when I try to do the right turn signal, it won't lock into place. I'll have to hold it if I want the turn signal to go. So I'm going to open up the steering wheel and see if I can find the issue. What you want to start with is the two Phillips screws that are on the back of the steering wheel here. Those are really simple to take out. Once that's off, there's just a few wires behind it for the cruise control. After that, we can take off our steering wheel nut. Once you get the steering wheel nut off, you're going to need to use a steering wheel puller. Now you can rent these from any kind of AutoZone or O'Reilly's, Napa, places like that that have rental tools. I made one out of an old caliper press that broke on me, so now it's been remanufactured into something else, but it works just fine for me. You just put the two bolts in and then it will pull the steering wheel off of the steering wheel shaft. Once we have our steering wheel off, we can now see our turn signal mechanism here. It's mostly just plastic for the turn signal stuff. As you can see, the hook for our right turn signal is broken off. That's why it's not sticking. Look at that. I just have to hold it there if I want to get that. So what I'm going to be doing is replacing that. I figured that would be the issue, so I went ahead already and picked up this Dorman replacement part 49301, and it is kind of an exact match for that. I'm thinking I can just pull that piece off and replace it with this new one that has the hooks on there. I could solder the wires on and it should be good to go. I did this process, as you can see in the video, and it did not work out. There are some metal leads that are on the plastic component and they touch different leads at certain times, and that creates the turn signal. However, those were just not working for me. I had to move them around. I tried them in different areas and it just was not working out for me. So after being fed up with this component, I am just going to replace the whole steering wheel assembly. So let's get going with that. The first thing you're going to want to do is remove the cover on the bottom here. It's just 4 little clips you have to unclip and you can get access to the bottom area there. Next, we're going to be removing our accessory panels here. Those weren't screwed in at all. You just gotta put a little force and pull those out. Next, if we look below our column here, we'll see the wiring cluster that we are going to need to remove in order to get that turn signal assembly out of the column. Once we take that off, we're going to need to loosen some of these bolts up top in order to get that wiring loom out of there. So we just have what should be 4 small bolts on each side and then 2 larger bolts on each side. We're going to be removing all 4 of the smaller bolts. We're going to be removing 1 of the bigger bolts, and then we're going to be loosening 1 of the other bolts, and that gives us enough wiggle room to pull out our wiring harness. Our plug out, we can start removing our assembly. Now we have 2 screws that are Phillips heads. We can remove those. Next, we can remove our hazard light grounding screw, and then after that we can take off our turn signal rod. Now that all of the pieces holding our assembly are removed, we can slowly start to get that out of there. Easy as that. Now for the turn signal assembly harness, it would be way too simple if we could just pull the assembly out of the column, but because of that plug there, it's just a little too big to pull out. So we're going to need to de-pin the plug so that we can get each wire out individually or in smaller groups so that they can fit through the column. I'm not going to be using this assembly anymore, so technically I could just cut the wires. However, I'm going to show you how to de-pin it properly, because you're gonna have to do it for the new assembly as well, so it's better to get some practice in now while we have a test assembly available. First thing we're gonna wanna do is to get out this middle section here. It's just a little plastic piece you can pry out using a pick, or a flathead screwdriver. It comes out pretty easily. After that, we can pull it out with some pliers. Let's get going on the smaller little clips. Now, each of these wires has its own little tiny clip that keeps it in there. As you can see right there, you just have to pry up each of those little clips individually, and then each wire will come out. That's how we get that depinned. And now we can easily pull out our assembly. All right, it's a couple days later. I have received my replacement turn signal assembly. I went ahead and ordered it from TRQ. They make some good quality stuff. Here's the model number for you. And here's what it looks like out of the bag. The kit comes with everything we're gonna need apart from the turn signal rod and a couple of the screws that we took out. But besides that, it is ready to be put into the column. Let's get started with that. So in order to make this job a little easier for us in reinstalling, we're going to remove this outer plate. And to get that off, we're going to need to take out the key lock cylinder. So that we just put the key in, turn it to the on position, stick a little pin up inside the little hole that's on the bottom of it, and it'll pull right out. Super easy there. There's just one screw holding this plate in place. With a Phillips head screwdriver, go ahead and remove that. And once we get that, the plate should come right off. Just pay attention how everything is coming apart so we can put it back together easier. Now that we have that out, we have better clearance to get our wires back in there. We can now remove our Prindle cable. That will give us even more clearance, and that's super simple. It's just a Phillips screwdriver and it is out. Next, we're going to do the same thing we did with the old wiring harness. We're going to be depinning our plug because the plug just won't fit as it is. So we need to depin that so we can get each individual cable through there and into the column. Before we depin this, it is super important that we take pictures of the pins and the wiring so that we can put it back together exactly how it is right now. Time to do what we practiced earlier. We are going to remove this middle section here with either a pick or a flathead screwdriver. That comes out really easily. Once we have that, we can now start depinning each of our wires, and that is exactly like we practiced earlier. So let's get that done. There we go. Perfect. Found it easier if we slide the sleeve kind of as far down as it can go to give us more access to our wires. From here, we're going to break them down into smaller little groups, and that makes it a whole lot easier to slip it into the column area because there's just still not a lot of clearance even after all the stuff we've disassembled. So grab a piece of electric tape, wrap it around each of the little groups, and that will be a lot easier to get into the column than the whole big loom. Once we have those done, we can start putting them back into our column. So one at a time, work each of those groups in there. Takes a little bit of time, but just have patience. Perfect. All right, now that we have our wires into our column, we can start replacing all of the parts that we took off. So let's go with this outer plate first. There's a small hole in the plate on the inside that matches up with this piece of the ignition. So we just have to make sure those line up properly and the set will push in. Perfect. After that, we can get our key cylinder back in. So that is just a little bit of working around there. You got to kind of see in there with a light. It's a little hard with the camera setup I have, but as you can see, it's not perfectly lined up. You just have to get a little flathead screwdriver and twist it a little bit, either clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on where it's off, and it'll get everything to line up there properly for the key cylinder to just slip in and be good to go. Now that that is fixed, perfect. It just pops right in, and then all you have to do is turn your key cylinder like you normally would, and it'll pop the key out. There we go, perfect. Now that we have that, we can replace our screw that was holding that plate in place. And after that, we can start reassembling our turn signal assembly. You want to note that on the back of the assembly here, we have this little piece that is eventually going to connect to our turn signal rod. It has a little part that sticks out. You're going to want to get that to line up with the hole on the inside of the column there. Those need to match up perfectly and press right in there for everything to work as it should. It would help if we push in these wires just a little bit. They kind of are spread out from the factory, but if you just push them in a little bit, you gotta kind of pinch them, the assembly pops right in there a whole lot easier. Let's work these wires around for our hazard ground. There will be a little clip, but that just pops right off. Now we can tighten that on. Perfect. Just be really careful not to crack any of the plastic, so just go slow. Now we can get the rest of the assembly on there. We got our turn signal rod reinstalled. Now we can get those two remaining screws back in. Give it a test. That clicks really nicely. Now that we have our new assembly installed, we can get our plug repinned, and then we can start putting all of this back together and we'll be good to go. So now we can start getting the electrical tape off of all of our pins. You can now refer to the picture that you took earlier to get all of these pins back into their proper places. Each of these little pins should snap back into place. You might have to use your pick to kind of just help move the little snaps into place. But once you get those on, the middle piece should just push right in there pretty easily. And there we go. We are ready to reconnect our plug underneath our column. All right, so now we can slide our plug underneath the column there where we gave ourselves room earlier. Now that we have that down there, we can start re-bolting our column to the support here. Go ahead and re-plug in our assembly and tighten down those bolts. Next, we can put our accessory panels back on, and after that, our lower panel. Our steering wheel is good to go back on now. Our steering wheel nut, and finally our cover, and then don't forget the two screws at the bottom to keep that cover on. Now that everything is reassembled, we can test out our turn signal. There we got our left one. Fantastic, both front and rear work. Let's try the right side. Perfect, our rear turn signal works. Let's see our front one. Perfect, there we go. Now we can test our assembly while driving. We want to make sure that your left and right click into place and that your turn signal cancel works after you make a turn. Thank you all very much for watching. If this video helped you, please like and subscribe to my channel. I have plenty of videos planned of different upgrades and repairs for different vehicles that I'm working on. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.